Now, page 55. He is the first to draw romantic heroines. His heroines, Margaret and Dorothea, anticipate Shakespeare's Rosalind and Celia. Thomas Kyd, 1558 to 1594. Kyd's only play, The Spanish Tragedy, 1585, a Senecan tragedy, is a landmark in drama. It is a well-constructed play in which the dramatist has skillfully woven passion, pathos and fear. He succeeded in producing dialogue that is forceful and capable. Kyd introduced the revenge motive in tragedy. He thus influenced Shakespeare's Hamlet and Webster's The Duchess of Malfi. The device of play within play which Shakespeare employed in Hamlet is used for the first time in the Spanish tragedy. He also introduced the hesitating type of hero in the character of Hieronimo, who anticipates the character of Hamlet. Thomas Lodge, 1558 to 1625, and Thomas Nash, 1558 to 1625, who wrote The Wounds of Civil War and The Isle of Dogs, respectively, did not make any significant and memorable contribution to the evolution of British drama. Christopher Marlowe, 1563 to 1593. As a dramatist, Marlowe surpassed all other university wits, and as metrist is almost as great as Shakespeare. His memorable plays are Tamburlaine, 1587 to 1588, Dr. Faustus, 1587, and Edward III, 1593. His other plays are The Jew of Malta, 1592, The Tragedy of Dido, The Queen of Carthage, the 1594, and The Massacre of Paris, 1596. Swinburne calls him the first great poet, the father of English tragedy, and the creator of blank verse. Nicholl calls him the most individual and the most talented pre-Shakespeareans. He was the first English dramatist who, according to Rickett, saw clearly enough that the romantic drama was better suited to the insular genius. Marlowe provided his big heroic subjects that appealed to human imagination. Marlowe's characters, Tamburlaine, Dr. Faustus, and the Jew of Malta, were outlined with strength and developed with fire. Each play illustrates one ruling passion in its growth, its power, and its extremes. Tamburlaine is obsessed with the passion of becoming the mightiest man on earth, to be the scourge of good and a terror to the world. Dr. Faustus is fired with the desire to possess all knowledge and all pleasure without toil and without law. The Jew of Malta depicts the passions of greed and hatred. He for the first time imparted individuality and dignity to the hero. Marlowe for the first time presented the tragic conflict between good and evil forces in Dr. Faustus. In the words of Pinto, Marlowe reveals for the first time in English drama the possibilities of psychological tragedy, the anguish of mind at war with itself. He was the first to use the device of nemesis in an artistic manner in Dr. Faustus. Marlowe's famous tragedies, Tamburlaine and Dr. Faustus, elevate the readers and spectators and do not depress them because they reveal the innate dignity of man and his untiring courage and persistent endeavor in the midst of odds and hazards. Edward II is the first important historical play. In it, Marlowe effectively handles the chronicle, and in this respect he influenced Shakespeare's Richard II. It is a play of more sustained power and of greater dramatic excellence. Like Dr. Faustus, it is not a collection of unconnected scenes. It is an organic whole. The Jew of Malta foreshadows the world of Ben Jonson's Volpone and Shakespeare's Shylock. Marlowe for the first time made blank verse a powerful vehicle for the expression of varied human emotions, as no one had ever done before him. His blank verse, which Ben Jonson calls Marlowe's mighty line, is noticeable for its splendor of diction, picturesqueness, vigor and energy, and its responsiveness to the demands of varying emotions. Marlowe created authentic romantic tragedy in English and paved the way for the development of Shakespeare's dramatic genius. Marlowe and Shakespeare. Shakespeare is highly indebted to his worthy predecessor Christopher Marlowe. S.A. Brooke observes, "Nevertheless, by force of poetry, not of dramatic art, Marlowe made a noble porch to the temple which Shakespeare built." W. J. Long also writes, "Here and there his work is remarkable for its splendid imagination, for the stateliness of his work, and for its rare bits of poetic beauty, but in dramatic instinct, in wide knowledge of human life, in delineation of woman's character, in delicate fancy which depicts an Ariel as perfectly as Macbeth. In a word, in all that makes a dramatic genius, Shakespeare stands alone. Marlowe simply prepared the way for the master who was to follow." End of page 55. Now page 56. Boas remarks, "Marlowe is the rapturous lyrist of limitless desire, Shakespeare the majestic spokesman of an inexorable moral law." Marlowe's limitations. Rickett says that Marlowe had, of course, the defects of his age, a frequent over-luxuriance of imagination, a lack of restraint, and extravagance bordering on the ridiculous. His plays suffer from the persistent hyperbola, weak construction, lack of humor, and want of well-developed characters. His characters show little dramatic development. His knowledge of human nature was neither extensive nor penetrative. He suffered from for want of humor and had little pathos. His sorrows are too loud. Their contribution to the drama, meaning Marlowe and Shakespeare's contribution to drama. Whatever may be said against their reproachable lifestyle as human beings, it will have to be admitted, to quote Allardyce Nicoll, they laid a sure basis for English theatre. For the understanding appropriately the combination of the university wits in this respect, we should first acquaint ourselves with the state of the English drama before them. Now, when the university wits started winning, there were starting before them. Now, when the university wits started writing, there were two fairly distinct traditions of the dramatic art before them. One was the native tradition especially of comedy, which was vigorous, no doubt, but devoid of the artistic discipline of the classical Greek and Roman drama. The other was the tradition set by the imitators of ancient Roman drama. The other was the tradition set by the imitators of ancient Roman drama. Such works as Sackville and Norton's Gorboduc tragedy and Ralph Doister comedy are instances of this tradition. These plays, though they exhibit ample awareness of the classical form and control, are devoid of the vigor of purely native plays. Differentiating between the popular and classical traditions, Allardyce Nicholl observes, the classicists had form but no fire. The popular dramatists had interest but little sense of form. The function of the university wits was to combine the form with fire. They had plenty of fire in them, all being reckless hedonists, but they had also the sense of form acquired by them from training in classical learning. While retaining in their dramatic works the vigor of popular native tradition, they gave them that literary grace and power which offered Shakespeare a viable and fitting medium for the expression of his genius. One thing which needs to be amply emphasized is that though the university wits looked to the classical drama and incorporated its general respect of form in their own productions, they never imitated slavishly. They retained for themselves sufficient freedom, sometimes even that of violating its well-recognized principles, such as the strict separation of the species, comedy and tragedy, for instance, the observance of the three unities, those of time, place and action, and the reporting of the major incidents to the audience through the dialogue of the dramatis personae or the agency of the messenger. What they established upon the English stage was not a pale copy of the ancient Greek or Roman drama, but a kind of romantic drama which was to be later adopted by Shakespeare himself. Lilly, Green and Peele contributed towards the establishment of the romantic comedy, and Kidd and Marlowe, K-Y-D, Kidd and Marlowe, Elizabethan tragedy. Besides, Marlowe, in his Edward II, set an example of the historical play for Shakespeare and others. Further, the university wits set about the work of reforming the language of the drama. They made the medium of dramatic utterance extremely pliant and responsive to all the various moods of endeavors to be conveyed through it. Lilly lent the language of comedy, especially the prose, a wonderfully sophisticated touch. Peele gave it a rare sweetness, and Green considerable geniality and openness. As regards the language of tragedy, Kidd did not do much except introducing exaggerative bombast, which is not always without vigor, but Marlowe breathed into it and that brilliance, that consuming intensity, coupled with virtuosic brilliance, which thrilled his contemporaries and thrills us even today. Blank verse became Marlowe's mighty line. Shakespeare's life, 1564 to 1616. William Shakespeare was born on or about the 23rd of April 1564 at Stratford-on-Avon, Warwickshire. He was the son of a prosperous tradesman of the town who a little later became the High Bailiff or Mayor. Though there was no actual record of the fact, it is practically certain that like other Stratford boys of his class, he went to the local grammar school, an excellent institution of its kind, where he learned Latin and arithmetic. While he never became a learned man, his few years at school gave him a sound education as far as it went. End of page 6, now page 57. Francis' financial misfortune presently overtook his father, and when he was about 14, he was taken from school that he might help the family by earning money on his own account and the nature of his employment. On account of the nature of his employment, however, we know nothing. In his 19th year, he married Anne Hathaway, a woman 8 years his senior, the daughter of a well-to-do yeoman of the neighbouring village of Shottery. This marriage was hasty and ill-advised, and appears to have been unhappy. 3 children were born to him: Susanna and the twins Judith and Hamnet. Tradition says that meanwhile he fell into bad company, and that a distilling escapade in the woods of Charlecote Hall obliged him to fly home. Their mare was not be truth in the the mare may not be truth in this story, we cannot tell. It is certain that a few years after his marriage, roughly around 1587, he left his native town to seek his fortunes in London. At this time, the drama was gaining rapidly in the popularity, and through the work of the university wits. Shakespeare soon turned to the stage and became first an actor, and then, though knowing without ceasing to be an actor, a playwright. At an ill-natured reference to him in a pamphlet written by Greene on his deathbed shows that in 1592 he was well known as a successful author. He remained in London upwards of 20 years after this, working hard, producing an average of a couple of days a year, and growing steady in fame and wealth. He became a shareholder in one of the leading theatres of that time, the Globe and the Blackfriars, and purchased property in Stratford and London. But years which brought prosperity also brought domestic sorrows. His only son died in 1596, his father in 1601, his younger brother Edmund, also an actor, in 1607, and his mother in 1608. Then between 1610 and 1612 he retired to Stratford, where he had bought a house. The largest of the where he had bought a house, the largest in the town, known as New Place. His elder daughter had already married Dr. John Hall, who was later celebrated as a physician. On February 10, 1616, Judith became the wife of Thomas Quincy, whose father had been one of the poet's closest friends. By this time, Shakespeare's health had broken down completely, and he died on the 23rd of April that year. The age of Shakespeare. In a brief review, it is to be observed, first of all, that Shakespeare's age had one of the vast and significant changes: the rise of the middle class, a centralized government, and the disappearance of medieval religious beliefs transformed England into a modern nation. Shakespeare was living in a world which idealized self-realization, self-respect, and boldness of thought and action. His characters are intensely individual and dynamic. His dramatic situations are precipitated by powerful impulses. The intensity of his plays reflects the ferment of the expanding Renaissance. The Elizabethan Theatre. Shakespeare's plays, moreover, are the climax of significant developments in the theatre, which more than any form of art was capable of expressing this ferment. The age was dramatic and therefore saw itself mirrored best in the drama. Moreover, says Emerson, the Elizabethan stage was for its period ballad, epic, newspaper, caucus, lecture, and library at the same time. The universities and the court vied with one another in favoring the stage. Strolling players drew appreciative audiences in the courtyard of large inns. The choir boys of St. Paul's were conscripted into the service of country comedies. Large theatres were hastily constructed to accommodate the avid audiences. Productions were spectacular. No device was held to be too debased or exalted if it aroused or sustained interest and excitement. Though the scenery was generally of the simplest and had for the most part to be imagined, the costuming was elaborate and the performances were enlivened with music, dancing, and acrobatics. Tragical situations alternate with farcical ones. Rhetoric and bombast were freely resorted to. Prologues and epilogues harangued the audience and pleaded for applause. In fact, Shakespeare wrote for a stage that could not afford to be static. The eternal Shakespeare. Shakespeare had a deep understanding of human nature. He had great sympathy for all manner of men. This accounts for the reality of his characters. Shakespeare's characters are real people, not cardboard boxes. They are not only individuals but also representatives of mankind, a myriad-colored humanity. As Ridley says, Shakespeare's characters have blood in their veins and move like human beings, but not like puppets. For example, one touch of Shakespeare, like the richest alchemy transmutes old Capulet, Juliet's father, into one of the most lifelike, tetchy young old gentlemen that ever stamped across the stage. End of page 57, now page 58. Again, that old rascal Falstaff, who is a huge bombard of sack and speaks gross lies, is a mountainous embodiment of irrepressible mirth and eternally youthful spirits. Shylock, who demands with great relish his pound of flesh and asks if it is it so nominated in the bond, becomes a spokesman of the modern democratic age in which everyone is in the mood to carry out the minimum obligations enforced by the letter of the law while asserting all his rights in an unqualified manner. Hamlet is only an eternally temporizing mirror in which is reflected the classic to be or not to be mood of the undecided men of today whose lives are characteristic by sick hurry and divided aims. Popular praise of Shakespeare hardly distinguishes between his poetic and dramatic geniuses, poetic as well as his dramatic genius. Many lines of his work are well known, like Portia's mercy speech, the enumeration of the 7 ages of man by Jacques, Hamlet's soliloquy, and Antony's oration on Caesar's death, and he is prized for his poetry like any other great poet, like Milton, Wordsworth or Shelley, but our homage is more strictly due to his dramatic genius. Why do the plays of Shakespeare make so universal an appeal? What are the qualities in common with Hamlet, Twelfth Night and Henry IV that are eternal and eternal joy to readers, and that arouse the applause of audiences in all parts of the world? Number 1. Holding up the mirror to nature. We may be justified in accepting as Shakespeare's own view what is spoken by intelligent and honest characters when Prince Hamlet refines the aim of drama, both at first and now. He was and is to hold a mirror up to nature, to show the virtue, her own feature, scorn her own image, and the very age and body of time, his form and pressure. It is an observation of wisdom for wisdom that the Duke of Orsino offers in his advice that men should marry wives younger than themselves. In holding up the mirror to nature, Shakespeare's greatness lies in the impartial matter in which he lets his characters discuss questions of life and faith and religious faith. This is also the secret of his universal appeal to all readers, to whatever sect or faith they belong. The sacrifice of the view of Epicurus, which supposes that the soul dies with the body, is implied in one place, and Prince Hamlet is not afraid of meeting his father's ghost because his soul is immortal and indestructible. That every little occurrence in the world is preordained by God. Even the fall of a sparrow is stated in one place, but elsewhere it is emphasized that man is the architect of his own future, own fortune. To the supposition that the science destroys all superstitious fears, amongst the others, and fears may be opposed Hamlet's profound warning.